Hi guys, it's StephanieGrams, the Memory Bear Business Coach. I just want to show you can sew more than just memory bears for your Keepsake sewing business. Today's tutorial is a popular cat pattern that you can find, well, you used to be able to find at your local fabric shops. Just shop around. I'm going to show you how to put a pocket in it, and if this was for a customer, I would have matched the pocket and would not have used such odd looking fabric, but you'll see throughout this video. This is the pattern I'm using. It's a style L9571 by McCall's. This is the cat pattern pieced out of it. Earlier in my playlist you should have seen me make this pattern into a dog, but today it is the cat, and I just wanted to keep it still so you could see which pattern number I was using. This is actually a gift for one of my daughters, and they said that I could go ahead and do what I wanted with it. So here I am. I'm just showing you some of the instructions. I make notes on all of my pattern pieces, whether it's a pattern that I purchased like this, I have a still here for you, or it's a pattern that I design. So here I am, sorry about the angle. Just cutting down the fabric around the pattern piece. I know it's a little difficult to see, but here I'm showing you what I have done. And what you will notice is this pattern piece, the fabric, the printed sides of the fabric needed to be folded together. Now this pattern piece, you have to flip the fabric where the pretty side or the good side is facing out towards you. So make sure when you're using this particular pattern that you pay attention to those details. Otherwise, your stuffed animal is not going to look right. If you are using someone's clothing instead of like this old blanket that my daughter had, definitely pay attention to the direction of the fabric, and you want to make sure that the clothing, I shouldn't say fabric, but the clothing, you want to pay attention to the direction, you know, the print of that clothing, but you also want to make sure that you have the pretty side facing out or facing in, depending on the pattern piece you're using. One tip that I share with my students in all of my sewing classes is this. When your customer sends you their piece of clothing, let's go with a shirt. A lot of times you'll end up with a shirt that's really difficult to tell the inside from the outside of the shirt. So as soon as you get that piece of clothing, again, let's go with the example of a shirt, hold it up, put it on a hanger and look at it. Pay close attention to the outside and the inside of that shirt. Before you start cutting it apart, I always recommend that you iron on your interfacing to the inside of the shirt, even before you start cutting it. Because once you start cutting that fabric, sometimes it's really, really difficult to know what the inside of the shirt was or what the outside of the shirt was. So that's just a tip I like to share with all of my Memory Bear and Keepsake sewing students. Here I'm just showing you the two pieces. The front panel of this cat, the fabric needed to be folded like inside out, if that makes sense. For the front panel of this cat, you needed to fold the pretty sides of the fabric facing each other. That way when you pin that front panel onto the fabric, you are looking at the raw or the ugly side. And I try not to use ugly or pretty, but that's the best way to explain what it is that we're doing with this video. So here I am, I'm sewing the front panel pieces together. Be very close. Pay very close attention to the directions, because you only sew half of these panels at a time. Otherwise, you're not going to have a 3D or 2D type of of cat or whatever it is you're working on. But for this video, it's a cat. Here I'm just snipping the curves. You definitely want to take your time. Snip all of the little curves without snipping your thread, because then you have to go back and resew it. And trust me, I've been sewing since I was 7 years old, so I've been sewing for over 40 years. There are times that I accidentally snip the seam. It's not a big deal. It just takes a little bit more time to go back and resew it. But take your time. You want to trim away any of the excess. And here is the front panel of the cat. Hopefully you can see the outline of the face. And you want to take your time and kind of press those seams open. I just used my finger press for this fabric. This was very thin fabric from a blanket that my daughter Angelica, the great grandma, sent to her years and years ago. I'm talking probably maybe 18 years ago. So my daughter has held on to this blanket and used it literally almost all of her life. But anyways, it was just easy to finger press that seam. This is the back panel of the cat, and I'm just removing all the straight pins. Sometimes people like to watch this part of a video, and just take your time. Remember, this video is at a 2x speed, so nothing actually took place this fast. On the back panel of this cat pattern, you have these darts that you need to sew. So take your time when you sew these. Line them up the best that you can, because whenever you're sewing a dart on any pattern, even if it's on clothing, if they don't line up, then your darts are crooked when you actually go to sew the finished product together. Like, you might have a dart that's higher than the other side, and so it looks cattywampus or something like that. Again, I'm just using a basic sewing machine. There's nothing fancy about this machine. I put a couple stickers on it just to make it mine, but my daughters gave me these stickers and I just stuck them on my machine. It just brings back some memories for me. But anyways, here I'm taking the panel. Again, this is still the back panel, and I take my time to pin a lot of these curves, because this particular fabric, even though it's already interfaced, it still has a little bit of stretch and pull to it. And you might run into that with some of your customers' clothing, where there's, no matter what interfacing you use, and no matter whether you cut against the grain or with the grain, that there's still an occasional time when there's a little bit of stretch and pull. So really, you want to take your time and give extra care to that type of fabric. Don't be in a rush, and because a lot of times you can't fix mistakes on your customer's clothing. Here I'm just showing you, I'm going to sew the back seam of this panel. You have to pay very close attention to this pattern because it has that weird tail that's attached. So definitely take your time around all of these curves. Alright, so I'm just showing you how I sew around the perimeter of the cat. It's about a 1/4 inch seam all the way around, but double check your pattern just to make sure that's the seam allowance that they're calling for. And then I like to snip the long threads. I can't stand having long thread in the way. Here you'll see that I have the front panel of the cat pattern, and I folded in half. I finger pressed the seams so it would lay in half properly. Here I'm taking the pattern piece and I'm measuring where the eyes go. And so all I did with this pattern is I took my marker, I poked a little hole through the pattern piece, and I made a little dot where the eye was going to go on one side. Here I'm folding it over, I'm taking a straight pin, and I'm poking it through from the back panel to this panel. I'm sorry, the front side of the panel. This is so the eyes are going to be even. And I just take my marker again, and I think I used a Sharpie for this tutorial, but don't use a Sharpie for yours. But what you want to do is color around that straight pin. That way, whenever you lay the front panel, the cat face out and lay it flat, your eyes will be put on evenly. I know a lot of people struggle with this, and I did at the very beginning too. I had cattywampus eyeballs on some of my practice keepsakes that I did sew, and I just learned some tips and tricks along the way, and I do share those with my sewing students. And here I'm just putting in the safety eyes. I have a list below this video of the eyes that I use. I also have a store on my website at StephanieGrams.com where I share the eyes, safety eyes and safety noses that I use. But anyways, you can definitely add more detail to the cat face by sewing on the nose and some whiskers and long eyelashes if you want at this point. Here I'm just snipping a little tiny hole for the safety nose. A lot of people use a seam ripper for that. I just didn't have mine on hand at that time. It was somewhere else in the sewing area. But you're going to want to take time and care when you create these items for your customers. Use erasable markers that are made for fabric only. Definitely take your time. I always recommend to my students, if they're brand new to sewing a cat, but you might be used to sewing dogs and dragons and bears, find secondhand clothing that belongs to you or at the store, and practice on that before you accept an order from a customer, because you can't go back and fix that customer's clothes if you mess it up. So definitely take the time and practice on something that belongs to you or that you've bought at a secondhand store. Here I am just pinning around the outer edge, the front and the back panels together. There's a lot of odd angles to this pattern, and so I'm not going to freehand sew this. I like to pin all of the curves and all the little seams evenly, and so I pin those together because I want them sewn evenly. And here the cat is sewn front and back together. I'm just turning it right side out and getting ready to stuff it. At this point, I would have used my hemostats and I would have pushed the ear corners up just a little bit. The pattern requires you to sew the ears. Don't stuff the ears. It doesn't look right. So you want to go ahead and sew a line between the head and the ear like I'm doing here. And then once you do that, you are going to sew the perimeter of the ear. And this will give your cat foldable dimensional ears. There's even ways to manipulate the ears so they look like a bat, but we can talk about that another time. But for today, we're going to do this cat pattern. And here you go. I'm just doing the outside area because we want those ears to be defined. And at this point, you could even sew on some black felt if you wanted to decorate the cat's ears. All right, here I am stuffing the cat, and so I've already defined the ears and we've already put on our eyes and our nose. So now we're just stuffing the cat. Make sure you get in all those crevices. You don't want a flimsy cat. Make sure you stuff that tail as full as you want. Push it around. All right, I'm going to show you in slow motion how to make a pocket for your teddy bears and cats and dogs and whatever you're making. Take a basic ruler and you're going to measure the length of the opening in the back. Whatever that length is, you're going to measure it. You're going to now measure the depth from the belly to the back. That's what I call the depth of the, if you're stuffing a big 22-inch memory bear, you're going to have more depth to work with than you do this tiny cat. But so, and here, to make it measuring easier, I made a hole in the polyfill just so I could get a better measurement for the depth, because you want your pocket to nestle inside all of that polyfill. That way, if you're going to put in ashes or some type of keepsake or the voice box, you want that item to be nestled amongst all that stuffing. A lot of customers want ashes or the memory or the voice box inside a pocket that they can remove if they want to or to add to. Anyways, I'm just showing you again. You're going to have 3 measurements at least. You're going to have the length of the opening, you're going to have the depth of the pocket, and you're going to have the width of the opening. And you're going to write all that down on a piece of paper. And if you need help and you're one of my students, let me know, because this is a coaching that I do offer with all of my classes to my students. If you're interested in being a student, visit StephanieGrams, GRAMS.com. As always, join the newsletter, it's free. So I'm writing down all of my measurements, the length, the width, the depth, because I'm going to need that. And I'm going to show you here, I use that for the fabric that I'm going to cut out, the little pattern piece that I create, and the piece of Velcro I'm going to use. Just remember, if this is for a customer, you want your Velcro and your pocket fabric to match the item that you're making. But I made this for my daughter, and because I was going to videotape it, I needed the Velcro and fabric to stand out so you could see what I was doing. I wanted you to be able to feel like you were looking over my shoulder while I was making this. All right, so there you have it. Those are the 3 measurements: the length of the opening, the depth of the pocket, and the width of the pocket. Here I am, I'm just cutting out the size of the pocket that I need. I'm using scrap paper. I used my ruler and my marker just to sketch it out. There's my little pocket fabric with the Velcro that I need. I'm going to sew the Velcro to the fabric and make my pocket. Once that's done, I am going to insert it into the cat. So here I am hand sewing the pocket inside. Now you could have taken your sewing machine and sewn the pocket in there, but I used my hand to sew because I wanted to show others that you don't always have to have a sewing machine to secure certain things. But if you're doing this for a customer, please consider using a sewing machine. It's just, everything is so much sturdier and more professional looking. But this is basically how you get your pocket inside the stuffed animal.